Whenever the devil harasses you thus, seek the company of men, or drink more, or joke and talk nonsense, or do some other merry thing. Sometimes we must drink more, sport, recreate ourselves, aye, and even sin a little to spite the devil, so that we leave him no place for troubling our consciences with trifles. We are conquered if we try too conscientiously not to sin at all. So when the devil says to you, "Do not drink," answer him, "I will drink and right freely, just because you tell me not to." Martin Luther.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
All right. What we are going to do tonight is we are going to do kind of similar to our music challenge. Tim is now going to do it with movies. We did not do it by directors. Instead, we're going to do it by decades. So we're going to do the 80s versus the 90s when it comes to movies. Now, again, I feel like this one kind of puts the 90s at a little bit of a disadvantage because, I mean, you know, everybody loves a coming of age story. And when you're coming of age, you tend to have an attachment to those things. They actually talk about the early years of college. So between the ages of like 15 through 20, maybe a little bit later, a little bit earlier, they talk about those years. I remember this in my psychology class. Whatever music you listen to, it's probably going to be around the music that you will listen to for the rest of your life.
Yep.
You'll go through different cycles and things and spurts, but
That's going to be your
those,
happy place.
Those are going to be a part of the core of your music or a part of the movies or whatever. So this will kind of be interesting. We'll see if we're able to get some kind of anything from it. So, but I think some of these are in the same decade. So great for ChatGPT to give me stuff. I would have to actually look up the dates of these releases in order enough to know. Some of them are, I don't know, we'll find out. So our first one that we have tonight is we're gonna go with the sci-fi genre to start. We're gonna go with Back to the Future versus Ghostbusters. Which one do you prefer?
Back to the Future.
I don't really feel like that one's that close. I was like, oh, interesting.
Although I think Ghostbusters is underrated. Bill Murray in there is just fantastic.
Yeah. So great. When did those come out?
Same time.
Is that
roughly? That it seemed, if I remember right.
Okay.
Yeah, they all came out. I want to say Days of Thunder, Ghostbusters, and Back to the Future all came out within like a year, or maybe even the same year of each other.
Forrest Gump versus The Shawshank Redemption.
Shawshank.
Yeah, I didn't feel like that one was close.
I think most people would be Forrest Gump, but Shawshank. Forrest Gump's really good, but to me, it's almost become so cliched that
it's a really, really well done movie.
It is.
That's for sure. It's not overdone for me. I get what you're saying by it's a cliche because so many people have tried to replicate that whole thing since then, but really well done movie. Jurassic Park versus Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Oh, I'm going to go with T2.
That's a good movie. Just so is Jurassic Park.
They're both fantastic.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park's gone out of its way to just get worse and worse over the years, but it's a fantastic movie. It was groundbreaking. T2 was filmed in my neighborhood. So
oh, no way.
That's
crazy.
It was filmed all around Northridge. The scene where he's chasing after him and he's got the shotgun and the box of roses.
Yeah.
That's in the Northridge Mall.
That's funny. Die Hard versus Lethal Weapon.
Ah,
I'm getting too old for this shit.
That's not fair.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Come to the coast, have a few laughs.
Yeah.
So I watch Die Hard every year.
And you don't even view it as a Christmas movie.
No, I like to joke about that it is just because it riles people up. It's not. But I mean, I watch it around Christmas time because it's fallen into that stupidity. But I just say it to rile people up. Where
I don't ever say it to
Jordan means it.
I don't think it's a Christmas movie, and I don't get offended by people saying it. But I do hold the argument that if you think that Home Alone is a Christmas movie, then you have to think that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I don't think that Home Alone is a Christmas movie, but I think it takes place around Christmas, but that doesn't make it a Christmas movie. Just like when people say Harry Potter is a Christmas movie, I'm like,
I think you're generally right, although the important moment is when he runs across the old timer who he thinks is
In
a
church?
slasher in church.
oh yeah.
And the guy kind of gives him. So there's that where they kind of hit it home where hasn't talked to his kid, and so there's that sort of prodigal family moment.
Anyways, back
But
to Die
that's
Hard.
I mean, most Christmas movies really aren't about Christmas.
Yeah, for sure. Die Hard versus Lethal Weapon.
Lethal Weapon.
Wow. The Lion King versus Beauty and the Beast.
Oh dear. Do I have to vote?
Yeah, you got to pick. I mean, listen, you can
Little Mermaid.
sure, you may not be a big fan of Disney movies, but at the end of the day, you still have to admit that
Lion King.
both of those are actually really good movies. Although, you know what the funniest part about The Lion King is? Because you chose that one, I was going to give a funny part about either one. First off, the funny thing about The Lion King is, one, remember how the kid's dad dies and he thinks that he's the reason for his dad's death? And The Lion King, that he thinks his dad dies and he's the reason for his dad's death. The two guys that show up and try to convince him to have a good time after that, Hakuna Matata, no worries. Therefore, compare the death of his father at his own hands to farting in public. They're just like...
Yes, it's not really that good of a movie.
Well, I mean, it's Hamlet, actually.
It's poorly done, Hamlet. Beauty and the Beast is just lady porn.
Beauty and the Beast. Shout out to the song about Gaston. Yeah. Beauty and the Beast is actually just letting kids know that bestiality is okay. But
no, it's
but the song about Gaston, I don't think a lot of people catch it, but there's like they're hyping him up. Obviously, they're giving him all these compliments or whatever, but then like occasionally Gaston recognizes it and he's like, I'm especially good at, this one thing that you're talking about. And they're like, yeah, nobody spits like Gaston. And he's like, I'm especially good at his spectorating or whatever the term is for spitting. Like, it's just like, I don't know. It's pretty funny. Kids don't catch on to those things. Anyways, Top Gun versus Days of Thunder. You already brought it up, Days of Thunder, tonight.
They're the same movie.
Well, except one's fighter jets and one's NASCAR.
Tom Cruise is literally making the same movie for about a decade.
Was he running in either of them?
He's always running. He's always a prodigy, up and coming prodigy, who then looks like he's making it big, and then is struck by a crisis of conscience or a catastrophe, and then he has to then rebound and come back. That's Days of Thunder. That's Top Gun. That's Cocktail. That's Far and Away. That's the lawyer movie, the Firm. I mean, every movie he was making was that for a good decade. That's Risky Business. Oh, boy. I'll go with Days of Thunder. I mean, Top Gun.
All right.
Oh, man, but the other one, Days of Thunder's got Robert Duvall in it. This is a good list.
Goodfellas versus Pulp Fiction.
Goodfellas.
Ooh, and didn't have to think about it. I've never seen Pulp Fiction, so this is a funny one. The Princess Bride versus Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, I was kind of hoping Princess Bride was going to get a little sleeper in there.
It was closer than it sounded.
What's the name of the comedian that plays the doctor character in The Princess Bride?
Oh, Billy Crystal.
Apparently the guy who plays Inigo Montoya,
Mandy Patinkin.
was literally throwing up because he could not stop laughing every time that Billy Crystal would say his lines and just deliver them, just be like,
Yeah, Mandy at that point was known for, I think he was Pirates of the Penzance guy for a long time on Broadway. Most of his career's been on Broadway.
oh, really?
He's done some shows here and there. Later in his life, I think once he's got run down physically and he couldn't like do stage work, he's been on like a lot of TV serials on CBS. He was in that Claire Danes CIA show on HBO or Showtime or whatever. So he's done a lot more like cerebral stuff, but like he was very much like Kevin Kline, where he was very like physical and a singer and all that. So I think it might have been one of the first movies he'd done. Actually, no, it was Kevin Kline who's Pirates of Penzance, because my parents saw him doing Pirates of Penzance in New York. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Billy Crystal he got overshadowed by Robin Williams, even though they're best of friends. And he was just cleaner than everybody else. He just kind of got lost in the mix. But the guy, you find some of his stand up, he's hysterical. He's very good, and he does very good. He doesn't do like spot on impersonations. He's very good at like doing caricature impersonations.
Well, he played a really great Jewish doctor in that.
Well, that's what he's very good at. Yeah, he's very good at doing that. And then he got wrapped up in the whole rom-com. I mean, well, he had a nice run in the '90s with Sleepless in Seattle. No, When Harry Met Sally, and he did.
Oh, he is in When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah, and then he did the movie where he goes out and wrangles cows.
I don't think I've seen it.
It's that one. So he had a nice run, but he had a really nice. It was like a poor man's Beverly Hills Cop. He had cop buddy comedy with the black guy who did ballet. Anyway, yeah, he's a hysterical dude. That ending there, and then the lady, I can't remember the lady's name, but she was a stand-up comedian. I think she was a Saturday Night Live person too. So it wasn't Gilda Radner. It was anyway. She's hysterical too. Liar, liar, liar.
That whole movie is fantastic. It's nothing but one-liners for you to quote. I was like, Andy's rolling over, bro. He's like, he's got lines for days. I used to joke around when me and one of my athletes who just graduated, I'm so sad that he's gone, but we used to make jokes. Whenever we'd have to pass with our left hand, we'd always quote the whole bit where he's like, why are you smiling? Because I know something you do not. What is that? I am not really left-handed.
So at that point, Carrie Ewells, who's the main character, was unknown. I think it might maybe done soap opera work or something. And then nobody knew about Robin Wright. I think that was her first movie. And you got Andre the Giant, and then the inconceivable guy, who nobody knew at that time, but then after that, you're like, oh, that's the inconceivable. Like, he became instantly famous after that.
Yeah, he became the manager he became the evil manager for every.
But there's sneaky actors in there. So there's the guy who's the priest who does marriage. He's a famous British comedian.
Yeah.
And then the guy who does Welcome to the Bit of Despair. He's also a very famous in Britain. He's a very famous comedic actor.
That's hilarious.
So he's got these sneaky. Rob Reiner had these sneaky actors to fill out the roster and make it very funny. My parents always laughed at the line, "My people." That just always got them laughing. My people.
It's actually considered among book people, and you can disagree if you wish, if you've ever read the book, but people talk about it as one of the few instances where the movie is better than the book. I mean, the book is fantastic. I own a collector's edition of it. It's really cool, really fun. But actually what they say that makes it is the father-son or the grandpa son bit, because in the story it's legitimately like he's reading it to someone, kind of thing. Like it kind of sets this whole thing up if you read the book, and so they do it really well with this grandpa son thing. And the grandpa's somebody, right? And doesn't the boy grow up to be somebody?
The grandfather, so the kid is the Wonder Years kid.
Yeah.
And then the grandfather is not Kojak, but the famous TV detective with the overcoat. I can't remember his name, but yeah, very famous actor. Very famous actor. You want I should read? You want I should continue to read? I'll let you rest. No, it's okay, Grandpa. You can keep reading. Look, it's hands down.
I'm not trying to make an argument.
Hands down a better movie, but Ferris Bueller in this is going to sound like crazy to some people. Ferris Bueller is kind of like the way I lived high school. So my high school years, my sophomore to senior year were insanely fun and funny, with all kinds of stuff getting away with, and I was fortunate to have very clever, funny friends, and it was just a lot of like mischief, like in a lot of the 80s movies, where you're just allowed to do dumb things and not get kicked out of school because you did something somebody didn't like that broke the rules, but it was like, all right, we're not going to kick you out of school, whereas these days it would be. So I have
all right. The one-timers. You watch it once and you're done. Schindler's List versus Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan with a younger Vin Diesel. And a very old Matt Damon. I wonder when Matt Damon's getting there, but he's not quite there yet, how he's going to look compared to his CGI or his makeup that he had, his old man makeup that he had.
Well, I'll go with Private Ryan, but I don't know. That's a toss-up.
It's a tough one. And last one, we're going to go with the 90s cult classics face-off. The Matrix versus Fight Club.
I'm going to go with Fight Club, but...
Oh, dang.
I really love The Matrix.
I love The Matrix.
I love The Matrix.
I love Fight Club,
and I actually really like the third Matrix. The 2's entertaining, but it is kind of weird. People hate the trilogy. I don't. I actually like them. People despise that scene in the third one, or is it the second one? No, it's the one where he runs into basically the AI god, and the god sits there and spouts off for 5 minutes what's going on. People hate that one. I love that scene because it's very pertinent to today. So.
Well, and lots of people don't know. So that guy, the admin or whatever, is the whole thing is actually a psychological. So it actually the whole story of the Matrix actually takes a lot of its inspiration from Freudian.
Yes,
and so the admin looks like Sigmund Freud.
Correct.
So they specifically put him over there, and it was like, and his whole like theory where he's like, I just had to wait for you to say the first word, and then that's where I now can predict blah blah blah. That was one of Freud's theories about the consciousness, because it was, a lot of people think it was about computers, but it was actually the Matrix is actually about people's brains.
Yes.
Was a lot of it. So it's a very smart movie that a lot of people don't realize is as smart as it is.
Yeah, and I don't.
Oh, well, and I'm not advocating. I'm just, you kind of went off on that where it was like, oh, people don't really like that bit or whatever, and I was like, well, I would make the argument if you were doing that. I was like, you're kind of missing some of the points of it. I'm not saying it's not cheesy or whatever.
I would say to the brothers who made the movies, you got to deal, like, don't get then pissed off when people are like, there's too much. I don't show up to the movies to think this hard.
Yeah. And then they'll be like, what about Christopher Nolan movies?
Right. I like watching movies where I have to think too hard and then still have it explained to me later, or someone write a book or other smarter people than me do a YouTube video and say, like, this is what's actually going on. And you're like, oh my God, that explains. Like, I appreciate that. And so I have for years and years watched anything. I mean, I don't spend like huge time.
Well, and I thought
something pops up. I was entertained by the whole Old Testament the Jews fleeing Egypt aspect of it, where people are like, this is 100% part of the story. And it's like Tolkien in Lord of the Rings, where you can't say Lord of the Rings is a Christian tale, but then you can't also say, well, there's no Christianity to it. There's certain absolutely aspects of Aragorn and Frodo that are Christ-like, and he's drawing that. So I like those kind of stories where there's layers and layers to it, and if you want to just watch it and you find it too confusing, I don't mean to sound like, well, you're a dumb idiot. I appreciate that people just like, I don't. If I wanted that, I'd read a book.
Well, and so I think that it was good that ChatGPT paired up that with Fight Club, because again, that's another one of those that is much deeper than the surface level. I feel like that one's easier to grasp. Like, you almost got to get nerdy about psychology to find the stuff in the Matrix.
Yeah,
that this thread that they're trying to weave through. You can definitely see the psychological fight, if you will, that's going on within Fight Club. That
Fight Club requires you 2 or 3 times to. Once you watched it once and you see the punch at the end, you see what's actually going on. Then you rewatch it and you see all of these Easter eggs, whether it be what Norton's doing, or even when you watch it the second or third or fourth time, you see characters in the background doing things you didn't notice because you're focused on Norton and what's his name. But you see people in the background doing things, and you're like, oh, he's doing that. Like, I didn't notice that before. That movie has just got layered so intently. And then the book is very good too. And also, I think that movie was prescient and early for its time. I mean, that movie basically explains the whole Groyper white nationalist angry thing going on, where I think a lot of kids feel it's prescient for technology. It's a very smart book and movie about.
It's very well done.
We like to think of everything technology as purely progress, and we're not talking enough about social problems that it's creating. So we're going to take a break and then start the main topic. Okay, so we're back. We're going to now do the main topic, which is we're going to attempt to take our Pastor Forrest has done 2 sermons, I think exactly a month. Did one month ago, in which he talked about, I don't remember what verse he was talking about. He's been doing a series, which I think is to be honest, I think the series overall is very convoluted. He picks a supposedly famous song that Christians sing for worship and then explains it, why it's important. And I feel like most of the time he's not really doing that, but
I felt like it was more of like
it's turned into a very good series, though.
That was an interesting series. I felt like that was kind of more of like a summer series. So if you don't really know kind of maybe how your church may or may not run like this, but most contemporary churches run where it's like, all right, this is the time for pastors to take their vacations. The reason for that is there's not really like after you get done with VBS or right around VBS, if your church does VBS, congregation is light. That no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, there's not a lot of people showing up for Sunday services, or not your usual numbers that you're putting up, right? Like Christmas is huge. They got to be there for all of Christmas. They got to be there for all of Easter. Like those aren't their typical break times, but summers are usually good for them because again, everybody else is out of town just like they are. And so,
yeah, we actually had a pastor back in the day shame people for being gone so much in the summer, doing stupid things like going to the lake and kids doing traveling baseball.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was a bit out of character for him. It was like, I think you're getting too old. You're turning into a cranky old man.
And so I thought this kind of series is really good. So usually what they do for those summer series is that they'll pick something that's really broad and to where they can pitch that to whoever.
Okay. Sorry, we got cut off.
Yeah, so whoever fills in for them over the summer, They're able to just pick that song and just be like, oh, or pick a song, and then they're able to just be like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about. So again, I don't think that it's a bad series. It's just, I was like, oh, that's something that's really easy for July. So I would have just assumed that would have been something for that. But apparently it was something that they were passionate about, that the whole teaching staff felt like they wanted to talk about it. So
it ended up being very good. The
yeah.
first Sunday that he did it, he based it around a song that I don't ever remember hearing, and he said it was the oldest known song in Christianity. It dates back to what was like, I don't know where it was, but it was something found with like the Dead Sea Scrolls or something.
It was just a Gregorian chant.
But in that one, in the midst of that sermon, he said that he brought up a quote by what's his name? Tozer. A.W. Tozer, who's a 20th century, or like early 20th century theologian, about God. And I'll read the quote, but Forrest said that for most of his life, or a good part of his life, he didn't agree with this quote. He didn't think it was true. But now that he's at a point in his life where he does agree with it, and so then he's talked a bit about this. And so I think it's a very good quote, and I think it's an important point. And then I think it then relates to what he then preached about 2 weeks ago, which was the prodigal son, which we've talked about probably 2 or 3 times on this podcast, if not more. So, but I'll read the Tozer quote first. He says, "What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Worship is pure or base as the worshiper entertains high or low thoughts of God. For this reason, the gravest question before the church is always God himself. And the most portentous fact about any man is not what he at any given time may say or do, but what he in his deep heart conceives God to be like. We tend by a secret law of the soul to move toward our mental image of God. This is true not only for the individual Christian, but the company of Christians that compose the church. Always the most revealing thing about the church is her idea of God, just as her most significant message is what she says about him or leaves unsaid, for her silence is often more eloquent than her speech." So basically he's saying, and he's specifically talking about the church. I would say it's not only church, but it extends to anybody who claims to believe in a deity, that really many times, and I would say as a Christian, too many times, our view of God is shaped by something other than the gospel in particular, but it's formed by something we have a we are raised, outside factors, whether it be family, national culture, nationalism, trauma at a young age, whatever, we come even to the Bible and the gospel with this preconceived notion of who God is, and we let that shape God and our view of God, and then therefore our relationship with him, and then his relationship with the church and the churches. And so again, Forrest said he didn't agree with that. When he read the quote, I was like, absolutely, this explains why we have, in a lot of ways, why we have different denominations. And it's funny, the weekend that he gave that sermon, there was a news story that came out that can't remember the guy's first name. His last name's Jeffress. He's a big time pastor in Dallas. He's got like a 50,000 person church in Dallas. And Trump had been I'm sorry, it's politics, but it's a perfect example of what we're talking about. Trump had been in a spat with the Pope earlier in the week, telling the Pope that, the Pope had come out with a message of nonviolence. And Trump came back and told him to go pound sand. He didn't know what he's talking about. And this guy, this quote unquote famous pastor, mega church pastor, came out and defended, and he's one of Trump's religious advisors, came out and said that Trump knows more about the Bible than the Pope does, and he's got a better view of the Bible than the Pope does. And specifically, he's got a better view of Romans 13 and what it means for nations to be on the earth. And so I read the quote and I'm thinking, It's been a while since I've read Romans 13, but I've read it many times. I don't remember. Then he went on to talk about in the quote, then he went on to talk specifically about the United States dispensing justice with these terrible countries like Iran and all that. And I'm thinking, I don't remember anything about Romans 13 saying anything remotely close to that. And so I looked it up really quick, and sure enough, there's literally nothing in there that says anything about one nation dispensing justice on another. All it talks about, it's one of the most misunderstood verses in the Bible, particularly by Americans, but it doesn't say that. And on the heels of this Tozer quote, I thought, oh, that's it. Jeffress is one of these Christians who comes to God. He no matter what he reads in the New Testament, no matter how much he's engaged with the Bible, he has allowed his human view of God, conceived, however, of God being this vengeful God of justice. And it's probably why I guarantee you, he's animated by Revelation, because there's, the strange imagery of Jesus riding on a horse with the blood-stained sword. And yes, the people who gravitate to that they have allowed. So that's one view, and certainly a problematic view in the United States. That's basically your whole Zionist movement, evangelical movement. It's us versus them. It's chosen people. It's a select group. I think that partially informed originally the whole notion of Calvinism and an elect versus. It's coming up with ways of where religiously, which we talked about many times, of just inventing new ways, even within the gospel, of bastardizing the gospel and coming up with goats and sheep.
I don't even know if it's a bastardization of the gospel. If you're listening to this podcast and you listen to us before, you could sit there and say, well, don't you guys have a particular lens through which you read scriptures or that you approach scripture, or you approach the teachings of God? And yeah, so let this add an extra layer of difficulty to Christianity. I'm not saying that it's a problem, but so like, for example, so this is, if you've read Mere Christianity before, kind of C.S. Lewis talks about where, how do I know which one's right? Right? Like, I've got all these doors in front of me, right? Like I have Jehovah's Witnesses, I have Christianity, I have Judaism or being Jewish, I have Muslim, Buddhism, Taoism, I have any other religion that exists within, the pantheon, whatever you want. Atheism. I have all these doors in front of me. How do I know which one's right? And so Mere Christianity goes through that argument of how we get to Christianity. And so you open that door and you get through it, and all of a sudden there's a fuck ton of other doors that are on the other side as well. And that's represented in what Tim was talking about. How do we have all these splits? All right, perfect. I chose Christianity. I've joined the team. And then you open the door and there's almost more choices here than there was on the other side. And there's like 72 different religions in fucking New Guinea. And somehow there's more choices on this other side of the Christianity door, where how am I supposed to know which one I'm supposed to pick? And it's really challenging, especially when pastors across the nation, religious leaders that are in Trump's cabinet, all believe that they are right. Just in the same way that anybody who believes in their religion, Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslim, Judaism, right? Like, I don't know why that's like such a struggle for me. Like,
because you're saying Judaism, which is really the right way to say it, instead of Judaism, which is what most people say. Like, we believe in Judy, but I think that's what's hanging you up.
Yeah, there's just like something about that that's just like, but we usually call them Jews or Jewish people, so it's just like Judaism, but that's
Judaism.
Yeah,
Judaism.
Yeah, it's Judah. It's the tribe of But anyways, So you have those people all believe that they are right. And then you get into Christianity and you see, like I said, you have all these other doors where everybody else feels like they are equally right on whatever it is that they're talking about. And what I'm going to tell you is an opinion. I think it's the correct opinion, just like everybody else thinks that they have the correct opinion. But a lot of people in the Christianity faith will definitely tell you that this is how you should therefore do it, because they're not going to want to disagree with this, because if they did, it would look really bad on them. And so the first thing that you need to do is you need to look to Jesus. If they're not saying that, that's a big red flag, right? Like, yes, no.
Yes.
I mean, okay, so, well, and
No,
hold up. You could even take it a step back from that. You could sit there and say, okay, first we're going to look at God. Because, right, that's ultimately what you're doing. If you're deciding to participate in a religion, you therefore have to look at a deity, or else you're doing atheism, right? Like, this is the whole, like, dogma, but, like, let's get to the whole, like, center where we talk about the centerpiece, right? We talk about the centers, then we have the dogmas, then we have the doctrines, then we have the realm of opinion. So let's get to that centerpiece. Let's make it to where that is defined, and then go from there. So we therefore have to establish a deity, okay? You have chosen to open the Christianity door, so therefore you recognize God, Jehovah, as your deity. From there, you have to then say, okay, who is this God? And who is this God, right? I mean, like, that is, like, there's multiple other questions, but let's get to the bare minimum. Who is this God that I am worshiping? And that's how you get to Jesus from there, because you can sit there and read Old Testament, and lots of people have gone to the Old Testament to therefore find their definition of who this God is that they're worshiping. Some people have gone to the New Testament, or they try to say that God has a split personality kind of stuff. What I'm going to make the argument to you is that Jesus Christ is the same God, which, again, actually aligns with the scriptures and aligns with the doctrine that suggests that God is the same person, 3 in 1. And so therefore, Jesus cannot do something that contradicts the Father. And so therefore, I have to sit in, and I believe that that is a freeing thing. A lot of people think that it is a complicated thing, which I don't blame you for thinking that is a complicated thing that has had to take lots of effort to be able to evaluate the Old Testament, to sit there and say, this is the best solution to this problem that is presented in the Old Testament. The problem that's presented in the Old Testament is you have a very violent, wrathful, jealous, spiteful at times God who does things on a whim, who seems to only care for his elect. And so you can get lots of different perspectives on that. But then we see God in the flesh. And again, if you've chosen Christianity, you did not choose Judaism. If you chose Christianity, then therefore you have to recognize that Jesus is the Son of God. And in that, you therefore have to recognize that God is also Jesus, and therefore he represents all of God's character. And so we therefore have to view God through the lens of Jesus Christ. And so if Jesus does not meet the criteria that you have ascribed him to, then therefore it's not necessarily thrown out, but therefore we have to look at what are some of the other factors that may have contributed to this kind of behavior, so to speak, from God. And that is something that goes into the realm of opinion, because it's not something that's necessarily explicitly spoken about within the scriptures. And so, where do we get with our conversation that we're going through today is that a lot of people have a perspective of God that exists elsewhere in the scriptures where they are not necessarily looking through the lens of Jesus Christ, or they're focusing on a very specific part of Jesus. They're focused on the flipping tables Jesus as opposed to this. But, and here's the thing, remember, if you've listened to this podcast, and if you haven't, let me just briefly explain. All 4 of the books of Jesus are also depicting a different version of Jesus.
Yep.
So all 4 of the gospels depict a different one. You're asked probably our favorite one, or my favorite one. I really like the depiction of Luke's Jesus, because again, this is a service-minded mindset Messiah. a teacher who has come to
The teacher healer.
to come and share the load with you. Mark is fast paced. There's not like a ton in Mark that he's trying to convince you of something of another. Remember that Matthew is definitely meant for a Jewish audience. There's this depiction that Jesus is Moses. And then John is John. You have, like I said, you have some of the greatest stories in John, some of the most powerful stories in John, but it's its own depiction of Jesus that doesn't, again, I'm not going to get into that. I'm just saying it's its own depiction of Jesus. You have some really great stories, and honestly, you can read that and you can still see God's character through and through, even if you may feel that, or people may feel that some of those stories are embellished. They're fantastic stories, fantastic. Right, there's not the parables that are going on in John. It's more of these stories, the interactions, right? This is where you get Zacchaeus. This is where you get the lady in the well. This is where you get water into wine. This is where you get, I'm trying to think of another one. It's like pretty famous. I was like, that's where this comes from, right? These kind of interactions that exist. And we get to see God's character and Jesus' character through that, which we love. Or this is where you get Lazarus. This is where you get Jesus flipping tables. We have this, which is fine, but we have to look at Jesus first. We have to start there and then go out from there. And the hard part is, and especially in our country, right? You have all these different doors. People don't get to choose. I know it seems like we're in a free country, you get to choose, right? If you choose to go, like if I was born in the Midwest, I'm going to be born into the Reformed door. And so I'm just going to go to Reformed. I'm going to go to a Reformed church. It's going to be from a Reformed pastor. And that's all I'm going to get my entire life. And therefore I'm going to go to a school. Like if I wanted to go and become a pastor, I'm going to go to Reformed churches or Reformed schools. And so I therefore go to a Reformed school, and then I perpetuate the narrative. And they are convinced, like there are certain aspects of theology where they hold on to and they become doctrine or dogmas that are taught within the school, and therefore they go out and they continue to preach it on a regular basis. Even though they're not dogmas or doctrines, they're something that completely exists within the realm of opinion and or, well, I guess opinions can encompass everything, but like, again, the borderline shouldn't even be said.
Right.
Something that doesn't even exist within the realm of opinion is just more of like, not even an opinion on the subject of religion. It's just more of your opinion on life, and therefore that's what we're going to share.
You're letting worldly views inform your Christianity.
Yeah.
I think is what you're saying.
And
it's all dressed up as otherwise, but it really is.
And these are people that are getting degrees. They could have a doctorate and still not fully, but they seem like an expert to you. You can sit there. I mean, listen, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little imposter syndrome after that, where I, calling out people with lots of education, and to where you can sit there and say, like, who are you, guy on a microphone that's just like out here for public criticism or whatever that's going to criticize these people. But again, I'm somebody who has stepped behind the scenes, who has seen it across, like I've been in more churches than most people. I know how all of this works. Yeah, this isn't my business. Like I don't make money off of this. I don't, like, if you feel like that's what makes me to have the ability to have a professional take on this, then sure, whatever, you can discredit whatever I'm saying. But I am telling you something that is true about churches in our nation, where there are people that are out there that are able to give a sermon on a Sunday, and they're able to convince, and I don't want to say brainwash, but convince an entire congregation of people, whether it be from, what's the national average, like 80 people, 80 people to hundreds of people, thousands of people for some of these pastors, that this is how the faith works. Yeah. So, I mean, you could even spin it in a positive light. What's his name down in Houston? has no problem sitting there and having people come to church and just be like, yep, our God is a God that performs miracles. And if you pray hard enough, he will cure your cancer, your terminal cancer, where they told you that you only have 2 weeks to live. Olstein, that's who I was thinking of.
Jesus is great. Jesus loves you. Jesus provides miracles and provision.
Yep. I was talking to this woman just the other day and she came to me talking about her cancer, and we prayed about it for 2 straight months. And Lord, she was healed. And that's the kind of blessing that I hope that all of you have today.
Look,
Which, again, I don't have, like, again, that's probably, there's good and there's bad things to all of this. Well, there's good and there's bad things to a lot of it out there. I don't even, that's not the worst narrative that they could be told. Like, I'm like, Tim shaking his head. You feel like that's the worst narrative that they could be told?
it's not the worst, but I think, first of all, if I sounded coming in hot.
I don't know. I've also been talking for a while, so.
If I sounded coming in hot on my first reading of the quote and monologue, then
I don't think
I'll be the first one to say I got a log in my eye. Like I think the only thing I have going is I've come to the conclusion that being a Jesus follower and trying to figure out who he is a lot harder, and it's not simple.
Yeah.
Where I think a lot of pastors will say, agree with me, but when they preach on Sunday, it sounds very simple.
Well,
and I will also say, I don't have what the Jesus message is figured out either, because I think partially because I think that's a feature, not a bug. I think Jesus spoke in riddles, and it's hard to figure it out because Jesus didn't want his ministry to be just another policy guide, because life isn't, you don't get to go through life going by what our policies are.
Yep.
You have to judge and say, one day I'm going to give money to this homeless guy one day, and I'm not going to the next day. I'm going to be a lot of things in being a Jesus follower, frankly, are moment to moment. And sometimes you figure out you got it wrong later. But we really need, and so stipulating that in a lot of areas I probably have notions of Jesus that are incorrect. I still think it's important, particularly in the United States, where we have some really toxic views, that they need to be called out and understand that they're being, I think it's a mix of, I'm not going to name pastors. I bet I can name 12 pastors that they're all in it for the wrong reasons. I don't even know that they're Christian, but they're flying around in Gulfstream airplanes and all that kind of stuff. That's not genuine. And I'm not even including Joel Osteen on that, because he inherited that church from his dad. But I will say Joel Osteen's gospel is closer to the Pharisees than it is the gospel. It's straight up like, you're going to be blessed because you're a Jesus follower, which is the shit that the Pharisees believe. Like, I have money and I have power and I'm not sick and I don't have leprosy because I am pure and I try to follow all the laws, and God then therefore blesses me. You're kind of running into the same sort of pharisaical religious views that Jesus spent most of his ministry getting the most angry at. Jesus isn't this magical genie bottle that we get to rub and say, oh, I want my cancer to go away. Nor is he an avenger, which is the other one that we like to do, whether we apply it to like us as Americans trying to dispense justice, truth and justice around the world, or even personally. There is no evening out of justice on this earth because Jesus died on the cross. We still live in a tragic world. That's the whole point of believing in him and trying to make it better. Because as long as people are being people, it's going to continue to be a tragic world. But this idea, and this isn't a Christian view. I mean, I think this is where the Tozer comment comes in. I think that's just a general archetype that humanity has, where a lot of people look at God as, you are my power of wrath to get back vengeance on this planet.
Yeah, it's
barbaric. Which is the whole point of like I said, like a I brought up where we're going to talk about the prodigal. It's Jesus' point at the end. It's like, no, there's no like wrathful moment. He the older son doesn't get his moment of like, well, doesn't he get how dare he not get his 10 lashes and sleep out with the servants for a while? And how does he get his, because that's not how this works. You can't do anything to earn this. It's my love. That's it. That's all it is. And remember that the whole sermon, the whole prodigal is one of 3 parables that he's taught. And the parables are a response to the Pharisees basically saying, mumbling aloud, again, as Forrest pointed out correctly, in the same way that Christians are very good at, mumble, who brought this guy? Oh, did you see who they're hanging out with? Blah, blah, blah. Very much in the same judgmental, blah, 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 not actually wanting to speak up, but very passively, aggressively being judgmental. They're like, who is this Jesus who claims to be a prophet sitting with the sinners and tax collectors? Now, probably everybody's heard that. If you're a Christian, you've heard that your entire life. The tax collectors thing really, really needs to be focused in on. Tax collectors are Jews who are selling out their country, their people. Think of the Jews who helped police in the ghettos in Poland during I can't remember the name of that term.
The Kapos.
Yes. Same thing. It is literally the same thing.
They're the college athletes that are gambling on their own.
They're college athletes that are gambling on their own and only getting a 2-game suspension. Those 2 things are equated.
Is that a horn?
I'm sorry. Americans are really good at delving into the second one, the tax collector thing. Not just the sinners, but the tax collector thing. The other. Not just because they're sinners and they're doing something, one of the 10 commandments, but because they're not in allegiance with the right team. And Jesus right there is saying, no, we don't do nationalism here. That's not a thing. And he makes it also clear when he's in the desert and he's challenged by the devil and Satan offers him the world, says, if you believe in me, if you bow down to me, I'll give you the entire world. And Jesus, in a roundabout way, says no. You would think if Jesus says no to controlling the world, why don't we as Christians say maybe we shouldn't be trying to control the world? But we live these outside notions inform our psyche, which then informs our Christianity rather than the other way around and just being like, all right. And I'm not saying you have to be anti-American. I'm not even saying you don't pray for your country and hope the best for your country. But it's not the thing to get worked up about. And America isn't at all involved. Zero. Literally nothing it is doing. In fact, if it's doing anything, it's a negative. If it is doing anything, it's a negative, but it's certainly doing no positive impact on expanding the gospel. Those 2 things are separate. One is an earthly thing, not focused on God, probably focused on Satan and ungodly things, and the other is the gospel and the church and the kingdom of heaven. But we time and time again, so I think it's 2 things. It's whatever your preconceived notion is, and I think that's based on, I would say for us, it's a Western culture thing. It's, it's everything you consume as a child is, whether it be, Robin Hood, comic books, everything is making right is justice against the unjust, equaling out wrongs. And by the time you get to where you're able to kind of digest and think about your Christianity, that's kind of built into it. By the time, if you've grown up in, well, it doesn't matter if you've not grown up in the church or you have grown up in the church. By the time you have the emotional and intellectual agency and maturity, agency, I mean, now you're doing it. It's not what your parents taught you. It's not what your church taught you. It's now you grappling with this. And now you're mature enough intellectually, emotionally to do it. That's already built in. You have built in that you went to a church that says, if I believe in God and I really follow Jesus, he'll bless me. So guess what? I then lose my job and I lose my house. Well, that's got to mean one thing, then I'm not really following Jesus, or Jesus doesn't really exist, or Jesus doesn't love me, because it's transactional. It's a transactional relationship. Or if you just grow up in America and, I mean, God forbid the last 20 years, you're a kid. And as much as I love Marvel movies and DC, just comic book movies, mainly because I look at them through the lens of Jesus, not the other way around. But most of us are letting that inform us on how justice is supposed to work and how things happen now. And you come to that, and then you're wronged at work or something, or your wife is murdered, or some family friend is raped or something, and you can't handle that this Jesus that you believe in doesn't give you the kind of justice that you want, because that's what you really cling on to, this whole religion thing. You're going to be disappointed because you're not coming to the gospel in the way Jesus intended it to be. And I'm not asking people to put us, like, people can rage. I'm not, I understand. Well, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying people can't get angry when bad things happen and just be like, oh, well, that's just the way the world works and we'll just die one day and go to heaven. I'm not saying that either, but we do have these views of God being, I would say, the cosmic genie or the cosmic avenger is the two main archetypes.
So, and I don't think that this is going to derail this. Plus, also, you brought up superhero movies. So then let's get to a supervillain movie. Talk about Joaquin Phoenix's The Joker.
Oh, one of the great characters. I mean,
so this is kind of an interesting bit where, again, you have, right? So we sit there and we say, like, and I think that this is kind of where our nation, right, like, it's almost like some of the issues that we're having, like, let's talk about Israel and Gaza. Let's start there. I mean, we could go to Israel, or we could go to the United States, Iran. But I think that Israel, Gaza is kind of a nice little, like, starting point where it's almost like, and I mean, where people are trying to get to the whole. So, like, we have Americans that are obviously pro-Israel, striking Gaza, take them out, like, the whole, like, superhero concept. And then we have people that are kind of like Joaquin Phoenix Joker people. So we have, like, the Avengers movies is like, oh man, we got the good guys. This is the team that we're on. This aligns with our way of thinking, blah, blah, blah. And then we have the people that are, like, on the Joaquin Phoenix Joker side where it's like, oh, but look at all of this that has happened in the past. Look at the situation that Israel has put them in or whatever. And this is where they come from to become this evil person that is therefore coming back to strike back at this position that they feel like they've been put in. So it's
I would even say that's the Heath Ledger Joker.
Well,
we don't have as much background.
We don't have as much of a backstory.
We don't have much of a backstory, but I think it's still the same. It's the same. It's someone who's been harmed at some point by society and ignored, and they're here to get revenge and cause chaos. They're a chaos agent.
And I think for us as Christians, we've been put in this side where we have to, or we've been put in this box in our society. Sorry to therefore quote Joaquin Phoenix's, which probably is like, we live in a society. But we have this binary choice, right? We have to sit there and say, oh, do we side with Gaza or do we side with Israel? And hopefully, if you've listened to this podcast before, you probably have heard Tim and I be very anti-Israel, or we've been pretty adamant about some of the things that Israel have been doing. But that doesn't mean that we're like Team Gaza. Like, that's the hard part where it's like, I'm not planting my flag with either person. There is a wrong. I'm just saying what's wrong.
Correct.
Like, I'm sitting there and saying that this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. And that's how we move forward. Instead of being this whole, like, we got to choose teams where one side's evil, one side's good. I think that we need to recognize that there are aspects of our origin story or other people's origin stories that are a lot like Joaquin Phoenix's The Joker. How far can I be pushed? How much is too much? Where society has beaten me and kicked, like, if you're sitting there and you're upset about rioters or looters that are a part of there are people that take advantage of that, sure, but there are people that are done.
Yeah.
Because wrong things have happened over and over and over again to them. And it's the same way, like we can't just sit there. Like, I think that one of the greatest, you brought up Avengers movies where you're like, oh, I love it. One of the great dilemmas that existed within the first series of Avengers movies, finishing with, because I haven't watched anything past Avengers. No, not Endgame. Yeah, Endgame. It was Infinity War, then Endgame.
Yeah.
Was Civil War, because, and if you haven't seen that movie, basically, Iron Man and Captain America go back against, but Iron Man is dealing with the issues of his powers being unchecked.
Yes.
Of him sitting there and saying, like, I went and I just did whatever I wanted and I hurt a lot of people. And we have to recognize that is all of us. We should be sitting there and saying we have, especially in the United States, we have power and responsibility. Whether you vote or not, your public opinion matters. What you guys are saying or voting for, allowing for, is we're allowing this to be permissible. We're sitting there and saying that, yes, it's okay to choose sides in this situation. And our Christianity is, therefore, we're using that as a weapon, right? We're weaponizing Christianity to either choose this side or another side. But really, at the end of the day, what we should be sitting there and saying is, this is wrong. This is wrong. And how do we heal this situation? Instead of sitting there and saying, how do we conquer this situation? I don't know. We become conquerors instead of healers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the left, unfortunately, has fallen to the reverse of that, where they view the world as a David versus Goliath thing. And so, therefore, anybody who's the oppressed is justified in doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah,
that's the oppressor.
Well, and that's why I brought up
No, that's not necessarily the kind of archetype you want to fall into either, where just because someone's being oppressed, they're ipso facto the righteous one.
Yeah, well, that's why I brought up the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. Are you sitting there and saying that he should be allowed to go out and murder all these people?
No lefty would say, but no, actually, you really are. And to your greater point, that's been our opinion on Gaza, where it's like, I don't like what Israel's doing to Gaza. This has gone way too far. This just now seems like wrath. I think that's literally the term we used a couple months ago. This isn't vengeance. It's beyond even. It's gone well past justice, let alone vengeance. Now it's wrath. But that doesn't mean that I sit there and sigh and say, well, you're pro-Palestinian. No, I'm not either, because what they did on October 7th was horrific. And they time and time again trip on their own dick and make themselves not to be people of character. Well, their leaders do. And the people who run wild to represent them to be like, no, I don't represent them either. But that doesn't give Hugo Chavez or not the old revolutionary Cuban. Like, I don't see him as he's a trendy shirt for college kids to wear because he's revolutionary. Like, no, read into the guy. The guy murdered like hundreds of people and raped women. Like, this isn't someone just because he was quote unquote oppressed by capitalists. That doesn't turn him into a hero.
Yeah, take it down to a micro scale, and you could sit there and say that this is a false analogy fallacy. But I'll be like, my question is, are you going to take the kid's the bully's side just because his dad puts out cigarettes on his arm for him beating the shit out of your son?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
You're just like, no, I'm not going to stand up for my son. That kid gets cigarettes put out on his arm. So sorry, kid, you're just going to have to get the shit beat out of you. Like,
no, exactly. I'm now informed, and I know why the kid why he ticks that way, and
And so let's be restorative in this situation.
So now I have empathy, and now I have empathy, but that doesn't mean that gives him carte blanche for the behavior. It's my way of coming in and saying, like, hang on, I know why. It's the scene in Good Will Hunting where Will's just acting up and being a dipshit all the time, and then finally he gets to him and says, I know, and he said, no, you don't know, and I don't. It's like that's the way of like. It's the breakthrough moment of, I understand why you refuse to live up to your potential and continually shit on yourself and keep yourself down because you don't think you're worthy of it. And so, but
we're not sitting there.
But we're not. It's not.
But once you know that, you're not sitting there and saying, we want vengeance. My kid's gonna go beat the shit out of your kid, and we're gonna get 5 other kids to all go up and jump this kid that's the bully that's having the cigarettes put out on his arm.
Absolutely.
No, what you're sitting there and saying is, I now have empathy. How do I make this restorative? One, I need to talk to my son, and I need to say, hey, this kid comes from this type of background. It doesn't make what he did right, but this is what he's dealing with. And so
he's probably not lashing out at you. He's probably lashing out at.
And so we're gonna make steps to try to make sure that, one, you're not getting beat up. That needs to stop. But then how do we therefore help this kid to be able to be somebody better than what he is right now? To where both of you are able to live harmoniously. You don't have to be friends.
Yeah.
But therefore restore this and help our world, our classroom, our environment, and like I said, our world be a better place.
Break the cycle of
violence.
But
we don't believe in breaking
abuse.
The cycle of violence.
No, we don't.
Because, and I've used this several times on the show where I talk about how I vote, or when it comes to politics, I'm just like, at the end of the day, that's not how the world works, and so therefore I can't, and I feel powerless. And I said, I said it on tonight's podcast where I'm like, you have this ability with your voice or whatever it is that you're saying it. And I mean, I guess there is an element where it's just like, yeah, I do feel powerless at the end of the day, where it's like, that's not how the world works, right? Like we could vote in a Christian president that has those types of morals or values. But at the end of the day, people are going to sit there and say countries are going to take advantage of us.
Right.
They're going to walk all over us and do whatever. And so America is not going to be put first. And who knows, we're going to have X, Y, and Z happen here, because at the end of the day, the dollar is the thing that runs the United States. And so I don't know how to fix that problem.
Well, I think the first step is trying not to fix the problem. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, my suggestion to you is,
I'm only laughing because I heard Tim say this like 3 or 4 times over the last week, and I'm not saying that I think Tim has found an epiphany, and he's like, I think we need to stop trying to fix problems. Like, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. Yeah. I just was like, yeah, I got it. I'm just laughing that I was like, oh, here it is again. Like, I was like, yeah, that's right. Like, it's not always. You are speaking to something that is like, in our world, we are always like, we got to fix the problem. And once again, I'm just like, I don't know how to fix it. Blah, just like throw my hands up in the air, and you're like, no, we don't have to fix it.
It's easier said than done. I mean, it's not like I've checked completely out of politics or anything. I consume it on a daily basis, but going back to that pastor where he's quoting Romans 13, he's taking Romans 13 as if like that's some carte blanche. That's some instruction for where God's instructed certain countries to punish other countries for their godliness. That's not one. I don't think that verse. I mean, this is a whole other discussion, and frankly, I don't even know how to answer this. Frankly, I probably need to read a book on this. There is somewhat of a contradiction, not somewhat. There is a surface level of contradiction between Jesus in the desert being offered all of the nations of the world, and then Paul in Romans saying God instructs all the government. So clearly those two things don't square. And if you're hearing me say like, or they're contradicting each other, it's like, no, we just haven't I haven't figured out necessarily how to square those two things. I say that necessarily. What I would say is we've taken Romans 13 as literally what we've done with Romans 13 is what every king in Europe did. And if you've watched any movies from Europe, when someone's medieval or Dark Ages king, you'll have some understanding of this, where kings in all of Europe that were part of Christendom, the Roman Catholic Church area, everybody had been bestowed by God. And they're taking that from the Romans verse. I look at Romans as being more of government is an instrument on earth as a means to maintain order and do its best to dispense justice on earth. And that's about all it's saying. It's basically saying government is an institution and it's blessed by God. It is not saying that Idi Amin in Africa was blessed by God, nor is it saying that Ronald Reagan was blessed by God because Idi Amin was in a African Muslim country and Ronald Reagan was the president of a Christian American country. It's not saying that. It's just saying government is government, deal with it basically, and then stop worrying about it. And we've taken Romans 13 as something of, no, we're going to shape government in the way we think God or Jesus wants it to be. And time again, because somehow we equate Jesus with Jeffersonian democracy, we keep stepping all over our dick and creating more chaos and more haters of Christianity than the other way around.
Yep.
And again, so if you come to Christianity, if your version of God is, I'm going to sound like some leftist for a minute. Your version of God is some white Christian Republican dispenser of justice who hates communism, which is that's not a caricature. There are a lot of Christians who view God that way. You don't have, that is not, I'm not saying you're not a Christian. But I'm saying you have a warped view of Christianity and is getting in the way of an authentic relationship with Jesus and therefore an authentic relationship with others. You can have a warped view of God and still be, I believe you can have a very warped view of Jesus and still believe and Jesus understands because of the whole Tozer quote, where you live, the circumstances you grew up in, that does not mean we should just sit back and not be reflective on if that's the case. And I want to remind everyone why I'm here on this podcast right now is because our dear friend Brandon and I had a conversation at church one day, and he asked me how I was doing, and I said, I've been really reflecting lately, and I think my view of Christianity is mostly informed by being a conservative, pro-market Republican American than it is being a true Jesus follower. And Brandon said, me too. And that started, it's probably been 20 years. 20-year what would be commonly called deconstruction, but I don't like that term because that's been basically deconstructing now basically means you become really not really a Jesus follower. It's untangling all of the shit that's gotten piled in, and it's decoding all of the nonsense that gets in the way of the authentic Jesus. And I'm not there yet. And I probably will never be there, but I've untangled a lot of garbage. And a lot of it is just, anyone who's listening to this and identifies right politically, I don't think anyone should be having a hard time figuring out what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We're very, very much being a Christian on the right means also free markets are a religion and democracy is a religion. And guess what? At the end of the day, Jesus doesn't give two shits about democracy and free markets. Do I believe if they're done well, that they're better for the world? And in some ways, and well, let me just 100% I can argue from an academic argument, and it's made by Max Weber, the great German philosopher. Capitalism is directly comes out of Christianity, specifically Protestantism. There's a whole book. If you go study, even at secular university, you're going to read a couple books on that. It's 100% capitalism. That's not to say capitalism couldn't have come out another way, but in the world that we live in the timeline of history, capitalism 100% comes out of the Protestant Reformation. So in that sense, it is sort of a Christian thing, but it is not something that should inform our Christianity. I could also argue that pure, unadulterated communism that is not polluted by the delusions and avarice of man is closer to first century Christianity than capitalism.
Yeah.
It is literally communism that the first church is operating on.
Yes, it is.
Doesn't matter what economic system you're operating from. It depends on where your heart is on that economic system. If you're all about free markets and making money, that's great, as long as you've got your eye on the kingdom and whatever you're being blessed with that free market, you're giving it away with. And if you're in a system where everything's given away and you understand that everyone's being equally blessed and the people and everyone in charge is making sure everyone's equally blessed, there's nothing wrong with that. And you can easily be a Christian where no one gets to vote on who the hell is running your country.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, yes, undemocratic countries tend to be more hostile to Christianity because they're run by a strong man and religion is, I get all that. Those are actual, but those are not things Christians should be actively fighting for, particularly with economic and military warfare, which is what we've been doing for the last 30, 40 years. Well, since the end of World War II in particular, but in some ways it's accelerated after the fall of the Soviet Union. Those two things don't mix.
Yeah.
We're not called to go kill Somalis because there's people because we don't like the way they run their government. There's zero about that that's Christian. And also, justice is not dispensed now. And I'm not calling out people who've actually had a loved one taken away from them. I can't imagine that. I would hope that if I had a loved one taken from me by another person, I could reflect Jesus and be forgiving, but in no instance where someone that I know is a Christian or it's been portrayed that they're faithful Bible people and they proclaim to be Christians and they want the wrath of the death penalty and everything. I don't look at them with judgment. Those are situations where by the grace of God go I, and so I'm not there to judge that.
Yep.
I can hold my lofty expectations of what I would do, but that doesn't mean I sit there and judge and be like, oh, that's not how we're supposed to do.
Tisk, tisk, tisk.
We're supposed to forgive others, even though so. But in much where we landed in so many of these things, what we landed on with the nonviolence, with what what's his name said, Boyd. So much of where we get hung up on the like, well, what would happen in this? Don't get hung up on that. Don't get hung up whether or not you would forgive the murder of your spouse. Just act as if. And then when the moment happens, the moment happens.
Yep.
But spend your days saying you would and professing you would and trying to live like you would. And if you do enough of those days and truly believe it, maybe you'll be equipped to actually handle it in a way that Jesus would want one to do. And maybe in those situations, Jesus doesn't want the loved one to do that. That's for others to do. I don't know. But we really got to work on deconstructing this nonsense that we have. And it's not anyone's fault. I think that should have been clear when I laid out like just so much of our entire archetype, our entire English archetype. And I love our culture. I love it. But, from Robin Hood to just so many archetypes are all about dispensing justice and that kind of thing. And so it makes sense. And you're like, well, that's what God is. If defining right and wrong is righting rights and wrongs now, then that's got to be, it makes sense that that's what God wants. And if that's what God wants, then that's who God is.
Yeah.
And so much of the Old Testament is that.
Yep. No, but that's what I was kind of trying to get to when I was talking about the pastors and as far as their influence over other people, where it's like, again, they get up on a pulpit and we view them as experts. And so they're able to sit there. And I'm not saying that you're brainwashed. It's just that's what you've been accustomed to since you were born. Like, there's no way to get around that. That's just, but it's also a part of the United States. But it's like, you have to remove the blindfold yourself. You have to sit there and realize, like, oh, this is a lens that I'm looking through. Like, you have to therefore remove it and try to look around and not sit there and put on another lens. It's more of take off that lens and see that everybody else is wearing lenses. Like, and then make decisions from there as opposed to whatever. And that's what I'm trying to establish with this, is that it's just like, yeah, you've been made to look through a particular lens for so long that it's made things different or difficult for you to be able to make adjustments or how you see. And I mean, like, we even view things through an American lens here, as Tim has been pointing out. And so it's like, you have to fight extra hard because it's comfortable. It's easy to sit there and just be like, oh, this is what I want to be a part of. And you can sit there and raise your stink about how we're operating and blah, 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 and just be like, rum, rum, rum. But really, that's not what God has called us to do. And so we have to make those adjustments. And I think the best place to do that is really establishing what I talked about earlier, where we need to establish what God's character is. And I think that that's the best place to look for that is what we talked about, which is the prodigal son story.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, if you've never read the prodigal son story, you have the son who asks for his inheritance, which means that I want your money, Father, more than I want you alive. I want what's coming to me for when you are dead. And for some of some of you think about that, like, think about going and asking your parents for your inheritance. Like, even if you're 55 years old and your parents are whatever, just be like, hey, I want to know how much you're worth in your last couple of days, and I want your money from that. Like, let's take out that life insurance, whatever. Like, I want that money. That's more important to me than your life. And then he goes to a far off land and he squanders it.
Stop on the far off land, because I thought that was a really good point that Forrest made.
Well, I have
when you read far off land,
I have a different reason for why far off land, but
say that one too. But I thought what Forrest's point was fantastic. He goes off to far off land, which basically means he's leaving everybody he knows. He's going off. He doesn't want to be associated with the family and the friends that he knows. He's going to where he's autonomous.
Yeah. I also think that the reason why he's going off to a far off land is, remember that this is actually, so when people talk about what is hell, this is hell.
Oh, yeah. Well, absolutely. That's great. Yeah.
So you have left all of God's graces. So you have removed yourself completely from God's sphere of influence.
Yeah.
You have locked yourself away from God. You have left his grace to be able to go further out. And you're just like, yep, I'm out here doing whatever it is that I want to do. And again, it's something that we put ourselves in. That's something that is emphasized over and over again in scripture, is that hell is a place that we put ourselves in.
Yeah.
It's not a place that God puts us in. It's where we sit there and say, I know better, and this is what I'm going to do. And so he goes and he squanders it. He squanders all of his money, loses it all, ends up starved, hungry, homeless. Ends up working with pigs. The emphasis with pigs is extremely important. This would have caused everybody in the room to be disgusted. Why? Because Jewish people don't associate with pigs. Forrest points out a pretty good fact here about pigs as kind of being like this close to cleanliness, but not aspect about pigs, where I think there's something there. I think it's kind of more of a fun fact, so I don't know if it's worth like really diving into about the whole like split hoof, like whatever kind of thing. Just know that again,
there's an element of shadiness to them. They pretend to look and act like
yeah, and so again,
cloven.
but it also represents this hell that this guy would be in. Where again, you're gonna eat what the pigs eat. You're gonna live with the pigs. Again, you're a Jew. That's the most uncleanly thing that we can think of that you would possibly do. And so he has to sit there and realize that he is in the filth, that he is in his own ways, in his mistakes, in his sin. And he has to come home, swallow his pride, and recognize to the Father that this is that, and right. And he starts off by being like, I'll be a servant in the household. I'll be a part. Whatever.
I just want to be in the house, and I don't care if I'm a servant. I don't even get I'm not a son anymore. But I just want to.
And then you have the symbology of the Father comes out to meet him where he's at, sees him from a long ways off, and runs out to meet him where he's at, emphasizing that God meets us where we are. And this isn't something that we're reading into. This is something that's intentionally put into the story. Sees him from a long ways off and comes and meets him there. And puts a robe around him, which represents power, right? Like it would have been made with purple, right?
Purple robe for sure.
He puts a ring on his finger, again, symbolizing that he has authority as a part of the family. Like, again, if you were given a ring, I'm trying to think of what's
the signet ring?
Think of like, is it Prince of Egypt?
Yeah.
Prince of Egypt, right? Ramses gives his ring to Moses, and therefore that shows his power.
You have the authority of the house.
Yeah,
you get to sign off on all things authority with the house. You get to send letters and sign contracts.
Yeah, and I mean it does. Yeah, so if you're sitting there and you're like, "What is?"
Because they're sealed with wax, and then the ring.
Yeah, exactly. And so remember, the Father represents God. He is now fully established. Kill the fattened calf. Let's have a feast in his honor. My boy has come home. And he brings him in, and they have this party. Put shoes on his feet.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a servant. Forrest outlines the fact that servants wouldn't have had shoes. And they bring him into the home, and they have this huge party for him. And again, this is a message of no matter what sins, no matter what atrocities have been committed in your life, that God will always meet you where you are and welcome you as a part of his family and bring you home. And then we have this brother who's upset, and kind of Forrest talked about this split, right? Where you have the brother who is far gone physically, but then you have the brother who is far gone mentally, where both need to come home in some aspects. And the brother who has been there the whole time, who's like, I've been faithful, I've done everything that I'm supposed to, I've been here the whole time, is not happy to see his brother get the same graces that he gets. And I think that fully sums up most people that are a part of the faith. This is why people want their jewels in heaven, so to speak. I've been there. I've done everything that you've asked of me. What do you mean that this person on their deathbed is able to sit there and say the same thing and we get the same benefits? God, do you not love me more? I prayed to you more. I did more for you. Because again, it was actually all about yourself rather than it was about doing things for the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think that it's really difficult when we talk about the afterlife, is that it's actually more of a selfish endeavor for a lot of people for a long period of time. Am I doing enough? What am I doing to try to, or what am I doing to ensure my eternal salvation? And there may be even parts of you that are like for your family or whatever. I remember when I was 17 years old, had night, like couldn't fall asleep at night because I was afraid of, I love my grandma and grandpa, or my Oma and Ompa, as I call them, but they're both atheists. And so I'm like, what's going to happen to them? And I would be so sad and depressed about what's going to happen to them if they don't repent, if they don't accept God and so there's this but that's still selfish on my part of just like, I want this for them. I want things to be the way that I want them to be. But ultimately, at the end of the day, God is sitting there and saying, it's not about you. It's about our family, and this is what we are a part of. And you need to be happy for your brother. And I mean, like, he leaves it open-ended. Like, does the brother come inside the house? Does he party you? Whatever.
Yeah, that was an interesting point. I mean, I'm sure I heard it before, but it's always important to point that out. The story ends. We don't hear whether or not the son storms off, or it was about 10 years ago. I don't remember. I've said this before on the show. I spent most of my life not remembering, and I'm sure I'm wrong. I'm sure they got taught this way and I just slept through that Sunday or something, or just for whatever reason didn't hit me. But it wasn't until about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, but when my friend Gilbert taught the prodigal son that way. Or was it JC? It was JC. It was Tim Brown for sure, and maybe JC. Anyway, two people came in, and it was very pointed. They were very delicately trying to point out to the church we were at before that you guys kind of need to, you're very inward focused. You're very much like about your community, and that's fine. But I'm using the prodigal to be like pointing out the judgmental part, the judgmentalism issue. So I heard Forrest, and for some reason, I had a little, I don't know if it's an epiphany. Maybe people hear this and that's nonsense. You're reading too much into it. It occurred to me, yes, I'm going to bring up Revelation. So I don't care if you view Revelation literally, like we're still going to have judgment and all that kind of stuff, 1,000-year reign, blah, 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 or symbolically. There's this moment in Revelation where Jesus creates his kingdom, and I believe it goes, he creates his kingdom, there's 1,000 years, and then there's still a judgment. There's like one more judgment for those who don't believe.
Yeah.
And they still say no. And I think the average believer looks at that as someone who's like, okay, as the archetypal, like, yeah, they like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that's why they say no. I'm not saying that that's not an element of it, but I think a heavy element of that is actually the older brother. That is people who sit around and are still, because they have their view of God. They view God as this way. They view God as equaling out and dispensing justice against those who they feel have not earned, who need justice dispensed against them, who need to be punished.
Yeah.
And they sit there after 1,000 years and still say, no, I refuse. If you are a God that allows that guy, that girl, that woman, that man to get into your kingdom, I don't want to have anything to do with it because they did this to me or other people and they don't deserve it. And if they don't deserve it, and since you say they deserve it, I don't want anything to do with it. And I think a lot of us, even as believers, if we're honest, that's our view of Christianity.
Yeah.
Because it is one of the original sins of humanity is to create religion. And so actually we had a really good discussion at Kauai about this on Friday, where one of our non-believing friends had really nice things about Christianity, but how so many times Christianity doesn't seem to live up to it. And we said, yeah, because Christianity time and time again has fallen into the pitfall of being a religion instead of being what it's supposed to be, which is a relationship, and then therefore living with Christ. And he fully accepted the answer and said that makes complete sense. So these aren't complicated things to say. And in fact, I would say, and we seem to be at a certain point in the American culture where I think more and more people, I think we've come out, as much as you and I are critical of the church and Christians, and because we get in our own stupid way, including you and me.
Yep.
I would say we're kind of, I think we're coming into a period. I mean, I would say the Israel war is not helping, but generally I think we're coming into a period where a lot of people are actually looking at Christianity more fondly than they did in maybe the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, partially because we don't have the religious right leading like as the front and center of as Christianity.
Yeah.
And when you hear people like Joe Rogan on his podcast regularly say, like, I know a lot of Christians. I think Joe goes to church regularly now. He says, I know Christians, and they're easily the most loving, helpful people. And, put in the caveat of people who really follow Jesus. That's not nothing. That there's that. I mean, there's a period where I don't think people would say that in quote unquote polite company.
Yeah.
And so I think that, we need to lean into that, and as many times as possible, there's an opportunity to live like that. So we're not having to try so hard to evangelize, but just live in the way that Jesus wants us to, through his lens, and in so many ways possible, throw off the lenses that we delude ourselves with, whether it be being the world avenger or trying to clean up the culture, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so good? I think it was a good one.
I think so.
I don't think it was necessarily a new topic, but I think it's one of those topics you can do on a regular basis. Honestly, when I heard Forrest give that sermon, I was like, if you're going to do a sermon every year, I would rather you preach the prodigal once a year, every year. I don't care if it's basically the same sermon, because you might miss people enough. There's enough people you missed last year because they're out of town or something, or you have new people. That's or even if you've just heard it a million times. As long as you're going to stand up there and tell the reason why you should give to the church over tithing, you should be preaching the prodigal. It's so much of it's the gospel in one. It's the why all in one. It's the why of you've fallen, and it's the why of you're not who you think you are.
Yeah.
All in one. And it's so funny because it's on the heels of two other stories where he's basically telling everybody, I'm going to do whatever I can to find the fallen. What was it Nolan said? The coin is, I'm going to do whatever to find 10%, and then the sheep is the 1%.
It was Brandon.
Or Brandon. And then the prodigal's the fifth. Like, it doesn't matter the percentage. Doesn't matter if it's 50%, 1%, 20%, or 4%, whatever the coin was. I think it was 20%. It's not a percentage thing. There's no percentage in Jesus' kingdom.
Yeah.
I weep and wish for everyone. There's no acceptable who don't follow me, and that doesn't even calculate. And so therefore, how dare you question whether I'm with the sinners and the tax collectors? All right, well, I think that's it. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Go to Hell podcast. Subscribe, rate, review. Just remember, like it said, we've been using AI for a while. So if you kind of want to skip over the parts where we're talking about nothing, the part of the show that's a show about nothing, well, we think it's stuff, but you might be bored. If you want to get to the heart of the conversation, there should be chapters, particularly, I know if you're using Apple, it's that way. I assume that's the way with Spotify too. So you can skip ahead. And if you don't care about movie or music drafts, you can go to hell.
That's right.
Actually, I'm not getting the show right there. We just did them drinking whiskey and beer the other night with all of the games that we've been playing the last couple weeks. Colton did it with our friends, some of who are friends of the show, and it was a lot of fun. So I think it's been a nice little thing that we've brought to the world. I mean, it's a TikTok thing, but I didn't know about it. So
that's right.
Play at home. And if you have really good ideas for other drafts, send them along.